Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. This is February 15th of 2022, and we have so much to talk about. International politics is a difficult subject at the best of times, even made worse when we have international tensions on many fronts across the globe. Whether you're talking about China and Taiwan, you're talking about North Korea affecting Japan and South Korea, whether you're looking at Iran looking to gain nuclear weapons and a stronghold in the Middle East, or of course, as we have been seeing most recently, the actions of Canada becoming more autocratic and the Ukraine being threatened by Russia. The world is in a very troubling position. And that position is getting worse because there are two different objectives that are going on at the same time by the major powers, and those interests don't bode well for the global public. Let me explain what we mean in just 1 second, but first we want you to know if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we welcome you and we thank you for being part of our audience. We do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to be able to hear your voices, to reach you and hear your tweets, your chats, and your phone calls to tell us what you think about the issues that are affecting us all across the globe. And we do that because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right, an inalienable right, to be able to speak about your government and your life, no matter where you live. So even if your government disagrees, even if the internet overlords disagree, we want to hear you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from anywhere in the globe. How do we address the conflict that is happening, especially the conflict with Russia and the Ukraine? It is one of the biggest conflicts that has been affecting the globe over the last 3 months. There's so much that's happening there, you would think, and yet there really isn't. International politics, one of the keys to it is to understand that almost everything that happens is done in small increments over a large period of time. Very few nations ever make a sudden or aberrant move. Because when they do something like that, well, we saw what happened in Afghanistan. We're seeing something different when it comes to Russia. And we've been talking about this for some time. In fact, back on December 10th of 2021, we were highlighting what was happening in Russia and what we could expect coming forward. And one of the key things that we saw on December 10th of 2021, as we reported, was that the Biden-Harris administration was looking to throw the Ukraine under a bus. They were going to force the Ukraine to give up some of its sovereignty, to give up its people and its lands, to hand it to Russia in an act of appeasement similar to that of 1938 in Britain. It didn't work well for the world. It's even worse now. But we see, as you can see here, the Biden-Harris administration officials have suggested that the U.S. will pressure the Ukraine to formally cede a measure of autonomy within its eastern Donbas region, which is now under the de facto control by the Russian-backed separatists who rose up in Kiev in 2014, which under the Obama administration forced the Ukraine to cede the Crimea to Russia. Now Russia is back and they're looking to take even more land. It was in January 26 of 2022 that, according to the Moscow Times, Russia's ruling party urged the Kremlin to arm the Ukrainian separatists. As this situation continued to move forward, after the United States Biden administration, Joe Biden himself, made several missteps saying that they expected an attack by Russia, that they were ceding some of the land of the Ukraine to Russia in an act of appeasement, in saying that there was nothing that could be done and that Russia ultimately would win in this, that even with the threat of sanctions, there was just nothing that could be done. We saw that Russia reacted to this so-called pressure and encouraged a military action. They encouraged taking their forces in the eastern Ukraine and arming them and allowing them to be seeded into Russia itself. Essentially, they're doing what Joe Biden said. That was followed up today, February 15th, as reported by Bloomberg News and others, that the Russian Dumas voted to ask Putin to recognize Ukrainian separatists. Now, while there has not been an official statement yet from the Russian government, we do know that the lower house, similar to in the United States, the House of Representatives, the Russian parliament voted to ask Vladimir Putin to essentially cede, to take the eastern portion of the Ukraine as these tensions are continuing to increase. That the government of Russia, whether you consider it to be a puppet government or not, is formally and publicly saying they want the land. They want part of that nation. And they can take it by force or they can take it by diplomacy, but this is their action. Again, all of these actions go back to what Joe Biden said in December of 2021. Now, many people are very confused because they will see news like this reported by CBS News on February 14th, yesterday, where they stated that the Russian units near the Ukraine moved into attack positions, which would support the commentary coming from the White House saying that Russia may attack imminently at any moment. In fact, they said, quote, the U.S. believes Russia will attack the Ukraine by the end of the week, although it is not yet certain what form that may take. Once the Russian attack begins, the U.S. knowledge of what is happening will dramatically decrease. Americans will have no troops on the ground and no reconnaissance planes over the air, and Russia's cyber attacks and electronic warfare will blot out communications. U.S. officials say Russia now has 80% of the forces it will need to launch a full-scale invasion, and the rest are en route. More than 100,000 Russian troops are amassed along Ukraine's borders to the east in Russia and north in Belarus. This is important. This goes in line with recent reporting as the Biden administration has tried to stand up as a leader in the negotiations, to stand up and try and be one of the leaders in trying to de-escalate Russia and its desires in the Ukraine. This has failed because in the last 3 months, we have consistently seen the Biden administration, through either Secretary of State Blinken or with Joe Biden directly, in phone calls and in public statements, have said the same thing over and over again. That there will be sanctions against the Russian government if they do this. That the United States will not put in troops, not to protect the Ukrainians and not to protect American citizens. And the American citizens are on their own to get out of that nation. The United States will not spend $315,000 to bring in a C-130 into Kiev to take all of the Americans, the civilians, and the children of those American civilians and bring them out of Kiev, out of harm's way. This is the scenario that we see. But the thing that should be confusing to people is even though Jake Sullivan out of CBS is saying that, well, Russia is getting ready to attack, Wall Street Journal noticed and reported just 24 hours later that Russian troops are pulling back. That, in fact, according to Business Insider, And from a video that was provided by the Russian Defense Ministry, as we can see, Russian troops are being moved out. They're leaving. Now, you can say whether or not you believe that Russia is being honest and true. Whether this is old video or if this is accurate, it's unknown. So there's nothing that's absolutely clear about this. And of course, when dealing with international politics, there rarely is anything that is absolutely clear. Everything is shrouded in doublespeak and delayed by time. But what we do know is that 130,000 troops from Russia have surrounded the Ukraine, especially its eastern border. We know that Russia wants to take over eastern Ukraine, just as they did with the Crimea in 2014 with the help of the Obama-Biden administration. We know that nothing has stopped Russia to date. We have to understand this context, and we have to understand it clearly, because I believe that the Biden administration is looking to use this conflict to bolster Joe Biden's public image for the 2022 and 2024 elections, that his goal is not to help the Ukraine nor to help our allies in NATO, but to improve his domestic agenda and to help his party win in an election. And he is trying to prop himself up as the leader that has strength to reverse the public image of his failures in Afghanistan, even as he repeats those failures in the Ukraine with American citizens that have been abandoned. On the other side, Russia is looking at this as an opportunity to be able to take advantage of the weakness of the United States and to gain more of what it actually wants, which is the land of the Ukraine, both for its food and resources and its strategic importance to Russia itself. This is the two battles that are going on right now. And the question is, who's winning? I would say that the United States is not winning because Joe Biden has had nothing concrete come from all of the bluster that he has put forward. And even with the fear that he has put into American citizens about the imminence of a war, which would not involve American troops, because we have guaranteed at the highest levels, we will not put one soldier in to save even one life, which leaves the Ukraine in a very difficult position. While yes, NATO and the United States have given it some money, and we have given them small arms, we have not given them the capability to fight against the military might of Russia if it truly wants to invade. That has not happened, nor will it happen. And we know this because of what Biden has said, not only repeatedly, but what he has said today, even as Russia says that they don't need as many troops as they have had sitting on the border of the Ukraine. Now, we will mention that on this channel, we have been reporting this consistently for the last 3 months, and we have mentioned that we believe that this is a critical week based on the weather and the political situation. This week would be the most critical time for Russia to either attack or it will step back. But we believe that Russia would step back only because it has gained more than it has lost. And I believe you're about to see that. We delayed this conversation today because we wanted to hear what would the Biden administration say about this, about the fact that Russia apparently is removing some of its troops, that the imminent attack, the movement of troops, seems to be a retreat of some of those troops, and the advancement of the potential of the takeover by Russia of the eastern portion of the Ukraine. Well, this is what he had to say according to C-SPAN today, February 15th, and we will play that for you in comment.
Good afternoon. Today I'd like to provide an update on the crisis involving Russia and Ukraine. From the beginning of this crisis, I have been absolutely clear and consistent. The United States is prepared no matter what happens.
And let us stop this for a moment, because that is a lie. That is a lie that we just showed you. The United States has not been clear or consistent. We have heard statements from Joe Biden himself on NBC News, reported by all of the world media, as he has said things that are directly and diametrically opposed to conversations that Secretary Anthony Blinken is having and later statements by the Biden administration. Biden hasn't been clear, and he has reversed positions, and he is taking several different positions throughout this entire process over the last 3 months. He just thinks you aren't paying attention and you don't remember. But let's go on.
We are ready with diplomacy, to engage in diplomacy with Russia and our allies and partners to improve stability and security in Europe as a whole. And we are ready to respond decisively to the Russian attack on Ukraine.
How would we decisively respond? Decisive. We're not putting any troops in. We won't protect our own citizens. The sanctions we have offered have meant nothing to Russia. And in fact, Russia can survive any sanctions because we already have sanctions on Russia. Russia is in a better position economically throughout this conflict, especially if they gain some of the land of the Ukraine. Their benefit is larger than the punishment that has been proposed by the United States and some members of NATO. Let's continue.
Is still very much a possibility. For all the events of the last few weeks and months, this has been our approach, and it remains our approach now. So today I want to speak to the American people about the situation on the ground, the steps we've taken, the actions we're prepared to take, and what's at stake for us and the world, and how this may impact on us here at home. For weeks now, together with our allies and partners, my administration has engaged in non-stop diplomacy. This weekend, I spoke again with President Putin to make clear that we are ready to keep pursuing high-level diplomacy, to reach written understandings among Russia, the United States, and the nations of Europe to address legitimate security concerns, if that's his wish.
And that resulted in nothing. Quite honestly, that was not useful. It didn't stop Russia. In fact, Vladimir Putin's statements remained exactly the same. Nothing that Joe Biden said to Vladimir Putin changed anything. So much so that both the British, the United Kingdom, and Germany have had to send in their diplomats to engage in conversations with Russia to try and supplement and or supersede the comments of Joe Biden and Antony Blinken. Nothing is working. That's the reality. Let's continue.
Security concerns and ours. President Putin and I agreed that our team should continue to engage toward this end, along with our European allies and partners.
And what is Russia asking for? They have asked for the Ukraine. They want the eastern portion of the Ukraine. They want guarantees of their control over another sovereign nation's future. And they want some guarantees in terms of economics, in terms of not enacting sanctions and allowing them to be able to benefit from the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is desperately needed by Germany and Europe. So let's go on and see what else is happening.
Yesterday, the Russian government publicly proposed to continue the diplomacy. I agree. We should give the diplomacy every chance to succeed. And I believe there are real ways to address our respective security concerns.
You do notice that he didn't highlight that at the same time, the Russian government is saying to arm the troops, their Russian-backed forces in the Ukraine, and they're asking them to take over the eastern portion of the Ukraine. Didn't mention that. In fact, no one in the United States is mentioning that truly. That's something that's being glossed over by the major news media. But it's important.
Just put on the table concrete ideas to establish a security environment in Europe. We're proposing new arms control measures, new transparency measures, new strategic stability measures. These measures would apply to all parties, NATO and Russia alike. We're willing to make practical, result-oriented steps that can advance our common security.
This sounds like he's saying he's going to back down to Russia, that he will ensure that the Ukraine and other nations will never be able to be part of NATO, that they will not have that sovereign choice. That's what it sounds like he's saying. But we'll hear more.
We will not sacrifice basic principles, though. Nations have a right to sovereignty and territorial integrity.
We agree.
They have the freedom to set their own course.
We agree.
And choose with whom they will associate.
Should be, but that's not on the table. Part of the discussion and key parts of the discussion with Russia is to say that they cannot do that. That is actually in violation. And Joe Biden in December, as we showed you, actually took the opposite position of what he is saying right now. The very same thing that the Russian government, its parliament, are saying right now. Something seems to not connect.
But that still leaves plenty of room for diplomacy and for de-escalation. That's the best way forward for all parties, in our view. We'll continue our diplomatic efforts in close consultation with our allies and our partners. As long as there is hope of diplomatic resolution that prevents the use of force and avoids incredible human suffering that would follow, we will pursue it. The Russian defense minister reported today that some military units are leaving their positions near Ukraine. That would be good, but we have not yet verified that. We have not yet verified the Russian military units are returning to their home bases. Indeed, our analysts indicate that they remain very much in a threatening position. And the fact remains, right now, Russia has more than 150,000 troops encircling Ukraine and Belarus and along Ukraine's border.
I find this interesting. In all of the reporting across the world, not one source that I have been able to find in any country has quoted 150,000 troops from Russia on the border of the Ukraine. The closest to that I have seen in reporting from Deutsche Welle out of Germany, out of the United Kingdom, is 130,000 troops. But maybe there's more, maybe there's less. We also see that when analysts are looking at troop movements, it's very difficult to understand whether troops are organizing to move away or if they are organizing to attack. That is unclear. So there are several big questions here, and there is a question of credibility of the statement that Joe Biden is making right now. But let's go on.
Invasion remains distinctly possible. That's why I've asked several times that all Americans in Ukraine leave now before it's too late to leave safely.
But he won't get anyone. In fact, he has said publicly on NBC News to Lester Holt that he will not save any American, that they are on their own. As we broke the news 2 weeks ago on Sunday on our live stream, the Biden administration told every American, especially those in the State Department that we have asked to be in the Ukraine, that they have to find their own way out of that nation, even as international flights have been shut down, especially if there is fighting happening in that nation. He will allow them to die. Let's continue.
It is why we have temporarily relocated our embassy from Kyiv to Lviv in western Ukraine, approaching the Polish border. And we've been transparent with the American people and with the world about Russia's plan and the seriousness of the situation so that everyone can see for themselves what is happening.
Well, what we've seen happening for 3 months is nothing. Russia's had the troops on the border of the Ukraine. The United States and some of NATO have said that Russia is threatening to take over. We have seen that the Biden administration said that they will win and that he is willing to give up part of the Ukraine to appease Russia. None of this has changed. Nothing has changed. Okay.
We've shared what we know and what we're doing about it. Let me be equally clear about what we are not doing. The United States and NATO are not a threat to Russia. Ukraine is not threatening Russia. Neither the U.S. nor NATO have missiles in Ukraine. We do not have plans to put them there as well.
He has just thrown the Ukraine under a bus. He has taken away their ability, the threat for the Ukraine to be able to defend itself from a nation like the Soviet Union, Russia. The Ukraine weaker by this statement and this statement for NATO, which the United States is only one member of, but of course we are the leaders of NATO. And so he has left a nation less able to defend itself. Let's see what else he has to say.
We're not targeting the people of Russia. We do not seek to destabilize Russia. To the citizens of Russia, you are not our enemy. And I do not believe you want a bloody, destructive war against Ukraine, a country and a people with whom you share such deep ties of family, history, and culture.
He has no idea what he's talking about there. Having been in Moscow, having lived in the Soviet Union for a year and a half, in Moscow, in Riga, in Tbilisi, I can tell you that's not an accurate statement. The peoples are very, very divided. They are very separate in their cultures and their histories. Even before Stalin decided to mix up all of the peoples that make up what we know as the Soviet Union or Russia by most Americans' thoughts, there isn't a commonality there. And there is, if anything, a great animosity that exists, especially in nations like Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine. So his statement is factually not correct.
77 years ago, our people fought and sacrificed side by side to end the worst war in history. World War II was a war of necessity. But if Russia attacks Ukraine, it would be a war of choice.
World War II, yes, the Russian government under Stalin initially was on the side of Germany. When Germany double-crossed them, they fought with the Allies. After World War II, more Russians were killed by Stalin and the socialist government than died in World War II itself. And that wasn't considered a war, that was considered a cleansing. And it was only exceeded by the cleansing that occurred in China when communists took over there. We have to keep these things in context and understand Russia is more than willing to go to war over a small country like the Ukraine.
Or a war without cause or reason.
There is a cause and there is a reason for Russia to take over the Ukraine. They want the resources. They need the buffer zone from NATO. They have many reasons why they want to do it. Whether or not you think those are justified is a different question. It's another thing to say that you don't like their reasons, but that's not the same as saying they have none. Russia has many. He's lying to the American people right there.
Say these things not to provoke, but to speak the truth.
It is provocative.
Because the truth matters.
It's not the truth.
Accountability matters. If Russia does invade in the days and weeks ahead, the human cost for Ukraine will be immense. And the strategic cost for Russia will also be immense. If Russia attacks Ukraine, it will be met with overwhelming international condemnation. The world will not forget that Russia chose needless death and destruction. Invading Ukraine will prove to be a self-inflicted wound.
Did Russia commit a self-inflicted wound when it invaded Georgia, Soviet Georgia, when it invaded the Ukraine in 2014 and took over the Crimea? This isn't something they haven't done before. The outrage of NATO and the world is not new. They've been suffering that for forever, and they continue to suffer it even now, whether or not they actually go into the Ukraine. Please, let's remember context here. What Biden is saying, the threats he is making, aren't new, they aren't original, and they've all been done before, and Russia didn't care. But we'll see. Let's go on.
The United States and our allies and partners will respond decisively. The West is united and galvanized. Today, our NATO allies and the alliance is as unified and determined as it has ever been.
No, we're not. Germany is not supporting almost any initiative that the Biden-Harris administration has put forward. Germany has been reluctant to try and put any support towards the Ukraine, which it shares a border with. That's just the reality. So again, Joe Biden is misleading the American people. The people of the rest of the world know this isn't true. And most importantly, Vladimir Putin and Russia know this isn't true.
And the source of our unbreakable strength continues to be the power, resilience, and universal appeal of our shared democratic value. Because this is about more than just Russia and Ukraine. It's about standing for what we believe in.
Well, I agree. This is more than just about Russia and the Ukraine. It's what we believe in, he says. Well, the Russians believe that they need the Ukraine. Whether you agree with that or not is separate, and I don't think they should have it, but they believe they need it. There are separatists in the eastern Ukraine that want to be part of Russia because of many factors that go over the history of Russia. I won't go into that now. But for the United States is looking at this as an opportunity to revitalize and reimagine Joe Biden as a strong leader. This is political for Joe Biden. For Germany, this is about energy. For Europe, this is about energy. This is about protecting themselves from an aggressive Russia and being able to have the energy they need, natural gas and oil, that comes from the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to be able to allow them to exist, to be able to keep their winters from freezing their people, and to have the energy they need to make the goods and products that they need to survive. So this isn't about the same things that Joe Biden's trying to make you think it's about. There are different goals for different nations in this conflict, and he's not representing honestly what the goals are for the Biden-Harris administration as opposed to NATO, as opposed to the Ukraine.
For the future we want for our world, for liberty, the right of countless countries to choose their own destiny.
But you've already said you're not going to help the Ukraine choose its own destiny. You won't back them up on that. And in fact, you've put them into a box where they don't have a choice. You will not give them the missiles they would need to protect themselves. You're not giving them the heavy weapons that they need to protect themselves. You will not allow any troops into their land to help them protect themselves. And that's the option you're saying, that NATO will not accept the Ukraine, nor will it defend the Ukraine, nor will it provide the Ukraine the ability to functionally be able to defend itself. Joe Biden, you're not helping other nations. You're hurting them.
And the right of people to determine their own futures, or the principle that a country can't change its neighbors' borders by force. That's our vision.
No, it's not. Under the Obama administration, you helped to make sure that the Ukraine, against its will, gave up the Crimea in 2014. That is a fact. You didn't stand by to make sure that Russia couldn't take that. You helped engineer that they did take it. So Factually, you're not telling the truth to the American people. Again.
Toward that end, I'm confident that vision, that freedom will prevail. Russia proceeds. We will rally the world to oppose its aggression. The United States and our allies and partners around the world are ready to impose powerful sanctions on export controls, including actions that we did not pursue when Russia invaded Crimea, eastern Ukraine.
Is there something new? I don't think so.
2014. We put intense pressure on their largest and most significant financial institutions and key industries.
We're already doing that.
These measures are ready to go.
We're already doing it.
As soon and if Russia moves. We'll impose long-term consequences that will undermine Russia's ability to compete economically and strategically.
We said that in 2014.
When it comes to Nord Stream 2, the pipeline that would bring natural gas from Russia to Germany, if Russia further invades Ukraine, it will not happen.
In December of 2021, the Biden administration backed the Senate Democrats in the United States in not sanctioning the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which Republicans had sought to do. There is the vote. It is on the record. Democrats guaranteed that Nord Stream 2 continues to move forward to this day. And now he wants to threaten the sanctions on that? Something that his party has voted to maintain? Okay.
While I will not send American servicemen to fight in Ukraine, we have supplied the Ukrainian military with equipment to help them defend themselves.
Some small arms. Not a lot of them. Some small arms. That's not defending themselves. Really. Because a handgun, a rifle, is not taking down a tank or a jet. Let's be honest.
We provided training and advice and intelligence for the same purpose.
Please don't take any advice that Joe Biden is providing you. Look around the world. Look at Afghanistan. Look at the advice that the Biden administration provided to the Afghan nationals. Look at the support and training that has been given to the Afghan nationals. Do you really want to have that given to your nation? Ukraine, don't listen to that.
And make no mistake, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power.
NATO territory is not threatened. NATO territory is not in question. He just threw the Ukraine under a bus again. This isn't a signal to stop Russia. This is a signal to tell and stop NATO.
One NATO country's attack against all of us. The United States' commitment to Article 5 is sacrosanct. Already, in response to Russia's buildup of troops, I've sent additional U.S. forces to bolster NATO's eastern flank. Several of our allies have also announced they'll add forces and capabilities to ensure deterrence and defense along NATO's eastern flank. We will also continue to conduct military exercises with our allies and partners to enhance defensive readiness. And if Russia invades, we'll take further steps to reinforce our presence in NATO, reassure us for our allies, and deter further aggression.
If Russia attacks and takes over the Ukraine, and they have made no statement nor shown any intention to try and take over Europe, what's the point? That's an empty statement that you're making. They have made no overt or covert statements about taking over anything else besides Ukraine. Now, is that possible in the future? Maybe. But you need more than just saying, well, we're going to defend NATO. We've already been doing that. That's been consistent. Russia has always known that. We have American troops in all of Europe. That hasn't changed. So you're not really saying anything here, Joe Biden.
To be clear, if Russia decides to invade, that would also have consequences here at home. But the American people understand that defending democracy and liberty is never without cost. This is a cause that unites Republicans and Democrats. And I want to thank the leaders and members of Congress of both parties who've forcefully spoken out in defense of our most basic, most bipartisan, most American principles.
Would that be the same Senate Democrats that voted to enable the Nord Stream 2 pipeline? Would that be the same Democrats in the Senate that voted to not allow any sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline? Are those the leaders that you're talking about? Because Republicans don't agree. So is that the support you're trying to talk about? Or are you just trying to look good for people who don't follow politics and hoping that this will be the 30-second soundbite that the major news media will put out there to make you sound like you are uniting the U.S. government and that you are a strong leader, which is not apparent from anything that you've said so far?
I will not pretend this will be painless. There could be impact on our energy prices.
Why is there an impact on United States energy prices if the Ukraine is taken over by Russia? Think about that for a moment, folks. How could that affect American energy? Because the American energy, we have solar, we have wind, we have hydroelectric, we have oil and gas. Oh, I understand. We cut down our oil and gas production and refining because of Joe Biden in January of 2021, which caused an increase in costs. But we don't get oil from Russia. We don't get natural gas from Russia. Europe does. Europe gets natural gas and oil from Russia. That's why they have Nord Stream 2. But the United States, under the prior president, President Trump, we were exporting and helping Europe to not rely on Russia because we had enough natural gas, not only for the United States, we had it for Europe as well. And we were a net exporter, which helped to keep our costs down. But under the Biden administration, since January of 2021, we have become a net importer again. And that means that Europe is more reliant on Russian natural gas and oil. The United States is reliant on imported natural gas and oil. And that has driven the cost up, both because of Europe and because the United States need. So, in fact, this is your problem, Joe Biden. This has nothing to do with Russia. This has to do with your policies domestically that are hurting Americans. And so you just want to blame it on the Russians when this is a consequence of what you've done. Okay.
So we are taking active steps to alleviate the pressure on our own energy markets and offset raising prices. We're coordinating with major energy consumers and producers. We're prepared to deploy all the tools and authority at our disposal to provide relief at the gas pump.
If you were going to do that, Joe Biden, energy costs in the United States are up 40%. Electricity is 46%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, according to the United States government right now. We have 7.5% inflation, with consumer production up 9.7%. If you are going to help Americans with their energy needs and reduce energy costs, where have you been? They have been doing nothing but increasing over the last year that you have been in the White House. Why did you wait? If you could fix this, then why haven't you fixed it already? Or is that a lie that just sounds really good on the nightly news and has nothing to do with reality? Let's continue.
Congress on additional measures to help protect consumers and address the impact of prices at the pump. We are not seeking direct confrontation with Russia, though I've been clear that if Russia targets Americans in Ukraine, we will respond forcefully.
We will? Because you told Lester Holt we won't. You've told the American people, we won't. You have told the world, we won't. You told Americans in the State Department that we won't. We have covered that. You're lying. You're conflicting with what you have already said for weeks. Makes no sense.
If Russia attacks the United States or our allies through asymmetric means, like disruptive cyber attacks against our companies or critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. We're moving in lockstep with our NATO allies and partners to deepen our collective defense against threats in cyberspace.
No, we're not.
Two paths are still open. For the sake of historic responsibility, Russia and the United States share for global stability, for the sake of our common future, to choose diplomacy. But let there be no doubt. If Russia commits this breach by invading Ukraine, responsible nations around the world will not hesitate to respond. We do not stand for freedom where it is at risk today. Will surely pay a steeper price tomorrow. Thank you. Keep you informed.
There is very little that can be taken from what Joe Biden has just said that should make anyone feel confident. Joe Biden made empty threats, contradicted statements he's been making for months, if not weeks, and had a lot of bluster, which will look great in an ad for the 2022 midterm elections, but serves no purpose in this conflict with Moscow, with the Soviet Union, with Russia and Vladimir Putin. And worst of all, it gives no comfort to the people of the Ukraine that are on the front lines. Perhaps you think we've misunderstood. We've tried to give you context. We've tried to show you what brought us to where we are today from different sources around the world and from Joe Biden himself. We want you to understand that so that you can understand what's going to happen and the consequences of it. We strongly believe that Joe Biden is absolutely focused on his domestic policy. He is looking for a win. He is looking for a way to bolster Democrats in the 2022 midterm elections and trying to recapture his ability to run in 2024 on the Democratic ticket unopposed. And to do that, he needs to look like a strong leader. He has to reverse the international image he has of failure from the Afghan retreat, the rout that the United States suffered, and the thousands of Americans that remain in Afghanistan to this day that he refuses to speak about. Just as we may have hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans in the Ukraine that will be abandoned in the same manner. And for Russia, they have very little to lose here. As it stands right now, it looks like Russia is looking to annex the eastern portion of the Ukraine, that they have been backed by their own government, and that the United States is more than willing to do this. And the Ukraine is being backed into a corner where they have no choice. Russia's about to win, and they don't have to fire a single shot. I'd like to see that we're wrong. And perhaps that's even better than if there's an actual conflict where people will be caught in crossfire, people will die, and potentially Americans may be killed even by accident, if not on purpose. Perhaps it's kinder to just let the annexation happen. But by no means should any American or anyone in the world consider this a positive outcome. The consequences, much like in 1938, much like with Neville Chamberlain, is bad. It's just a matter of how bad it will become and how long it takes for us to realize the consequences that this will result in. But we look forward to hearing what you have to say. What do you think about what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine? How is Joe Biden affecting this? Is he helping? Is he hurting? What do you have to say? We look forward to seeing your comments and to see you join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.